Religion's been a big part. So for those that don't know, I'm Muslim. It's probably a shock to some people, but and to others it's not. It comes down to a podcast. The religion is very much like guidelines on how to live ethically, morally, and it clicked with me because it's things that I feel that I needed to take me to the next level.
The UFC is home to many esoteric practices. Rigo, the leading occult expert on MMA YouTube, has done a fantastic job of exposing these through his spiritual breakdowns, tattoo investigations, and clear Masonic ties. Today I will be unveiling the truth about Jake Matthews' worship of false gods. Over 10 years ago, on June 28th, 2014, a then 19-year-old Jake Matthews makes his UFC debut, only a year and a half after his very first fight. A chill and humble man, born and raised in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. His father would train Jake and his brother in their back garden shed. His father is still his coach to this day. This is starting to remind me of Tom Aspinall and his father. Although being born in Australia to native parents, he's already reaching by calling himself the Celtic Kid, allegedly out of respect for his grandmother, who I'm assuming was from the British Isles. Now let's take a look at Jake's tattoos. He has a mixture of Celtic and Norse symbols. To be clear, the Irish cycles are where we get most of our source material, so most Celtic deities we know today are Irish deities. Jake uses a variety of Celtic knots, triquetras or Trinity knots, Celtic bands along with Norse runes. Rune magic, of course, is a form of divination and spellcasting that uses the elemental powers believed to be possessed by the runes. These symbols are combined in different ways, usually meaning something personal to each individual, where the Celtic knot represents eternity of life. On his lower back, he has a Celtic-inspired pattern tattoo. The tattoo has some Celtic knots embedded in it, along with, I believe, Odin, or just a warrior's face. On his left arm, he has a sleeve brewing with Celtic and Viking-inspired knots and patterns. On his right arm, he has a sleeve depicting the Norse god Thor battling with Fenrir. Thor being the god of thunder, while Fenrir was a giant wolf, the eternal battle between good and evil. Nordic can be exchanged with Norse, but what we're talking about is Scandinavia, up to Iceland where we find the main written source material. German paganism is roped into this due to their similarities. On Jake's forearm, we see a depiction of Valkyrie, chooser of the slain. Valkyrie is one of a host of female figures who guides the souls of the dead to Odin's hall, Valhalla. Odin is symbolized by Jupiter due to both of them having only a single eye. The equivalent in Celtic mythology would be the Dagda, both gods of war, both wandering grey-bearded men with many kids. The Dagda is druidic, while Odin is associated with rune work. Odin sacrificed his eye to drink from the well of Mimir, gaining immense knowledge. His ravens, Hugin and Munin, are his messengers. Now, let's get right into Jake Matthews' conversion to Islam and why I think he did it. Claiming to have been inspired by a podcast, Jake has now completed the Hajj ritual in Mecca and is a self-proclaimed Muslim or follower of Islam. But Islam is not what you may think it is, and I will be breaking down the Saturnization of the religion and how Jake Matthews and many others have been deceived by the subversion of truth. There is nothing new under the sun, and the worship of Baal is no exemption. Throughout the Old Testament, God rebukes and disciplines his people for their habit of turning to the false god Baal. Baal shows up in the New Testament under the name Beelzebub, known as the Prince of Demons, Baal meaning husband, lord, or master, and Zebub meaning of the flies or of the house. Baal was the chief god that Satan used to get Israel to worship something other than Jehovah. Satan is the prince of demons. Baal is simply another name for Satan, a mere disguise. Satan has various names: the devil, Belial, the serpent, the dragon. He disguises himself as false gods. Baal was the chief competitor to Judeo-Christianity. Today, it's Islam. But what's the difference? I'm not suggesting that Muslims know they're worshipping Baal, just like the Israelites didn't know they were worshipping Satan when they were worshipping Baal. That's the deception. However, they were worshipping demons nonetheless. Satan doesn't care if you worship, believe in, or even acknowledge him. He just doesn't want you to know the true gospel, for that is the only way to escape him. Hubal is the Arabic name for Baal, meaning he is Baal. Hubal was the chief god of Mecca and of the shrine, the Kaaba. Mecca is where Muhammad was born, belonging to the Quraysh tribe. According to Muslim sources, the Meccans were into astral worship, meaning they associated the planets, the sun, and the moon with their gods and goddesses. At the time, there was only believed to be 7 planets in total: the moon and the sun, then Mercury and Venus, the morning and evening stars. Then came 5, 6, and 7, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, each with their own deities. In many cultures, the sun was the male deity and the moon was the female deity. However, we see the complete inverse in Arabia. The Kaaba was a shrine that housed 360 idols, probably the amount of days they had in a calendar year. This was destroyed by Muhammad eventually, but the pagans before Muhammad would perform what they called the rites of pilgrimage, Hajj and Umrah. They would visit the Kaaba and circle the black cube 7 times, something Muslims do to this day. They adopted these practices from the pagans before them. They also ran between 2 mountains known as Safa and Marwa 7 times. The pagans did this in worship of the 7 planetary deities, Saturn being the 7th planet, represented by the colour black, and the shape associated with Saturn is, you guessed it, a cube. These desert pagans became the rings of Saturn, while the Kaaba is the planet itself. I would just like to point out that Saturday, or Saturn's Day, is the day of rest in Islam. The moon being the male deity at the top of the patriarchy, because it's the planet associated with the chief god of the pantheon. Worshipped by the Arab pagans, if the moon is masculine, Qamar, that means for the pagans, Allah was the moon god. But I thought Hubal was the chief god. And Hubal is just Baal, right? And Baal is a disguise used by Satan. What could this mean? The new Encyclopaedia of Islam, page 209. Hubal, an idol, the god of the moon. Centuries before Islam, Aban ibn Luay, a chief of the tribe of Dirhum, would go to Mecca before the coming of the Quraysh tribe, brought the idol of Hubal from the city of Syria. This became the principal idol of the pagan Meccans. The Syrians worshipped Baal before Muhammad. To wrap it all up, the chief god of the Quraysh was Hubal. Hubal was the god of the moon, an idol brought from Syria. Muhammad was born into the Quraysh tribe. He was born into Baal worship, similar to our friend Jake Matthews.